I was studying differential erosion rates in sandstone formations across the Colorado Plateau, trying to understand why the lateral recession numbers didn't match standard models. While mapping flat-topped buttes, a proportion caught my eye that had nothing to do with erosion. These formations weren't just wide for their height, they followed a very specific ratio, consistent across sites hundreds of miles apart. It matched something I recognized from forestry data: the trunk diameter to stump height relationship in massive, mature conifers. I set the geology aside and stared at the numbers. Before we continue, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you're new here, hit subscribe for more videos like this. I came to the giant tree theory sideways, through data I didn't even need for my original question. The survey records contained proportion tables that felt strangely familiar. It took me longer than I'd like to admit to realize where I'd seen them. Once it clicked, I closed the geology files and spent 3 days reading paleobotanical literature instead. Here's what that literature actually shows. Prototaxites from the Devonian, around 420 million years ago, reached trunk diameters of about 3 feet in heights, estimated between 15 and 25 feet. Lepidodendron in the Carboniferous grew to roughly 100 feet with 6-foot base diameters. The vast coal beds of that period represent compressed biomass from forests, on a scale no modern forest approaches. The fossil record doesn't treat gigantic trees as fantasy, it treats them as documented reality at multiple points in Earth's history. So the giant tree theory isn't asking us to accept something biologically impossible. That was the first realization I had to sit with. What the theory actually proposes is more precise. That certain iconic formations isolate flat-topped butte columnar structures. Table Mountains are the preserved stumps of trees that once grew far larger than anything alive today, yet still within the biological range shown by the fossil record, and their proportions match the structural ratios of real large trees in ways that standard erosion or igneous models don't fully explain. The claim rests on ratio, and ratio is testable. In mature large conifers, the relationship between trunk diameter and height typically falls between 150 and 1 to 100. A giant sequoia with a 30-foot trunk can reach 250 to 380 feet. The ratio comes from physics: how trees handle load, stress, and vascular transport. Apply that same ratio to the isolated buttes of the American Southwest. A formation with a 200-foot summit diameter implies, at the lower end of the conifer ratio, an original vertical scale that proponents say fits within the fossil record of truly large organisms. Geologists see coincidence. Proponents see a fingerprint. Neither side has been settled by direct testing at the base substrate. Hexagonal geometry draws the most attention. Basalt columns form hexagons through columni jointing, confirmed volcanic process, where even cooling creates 120-degree stress fractures that resolve into 6-sided cells. The same geometry appears in honeycombs and certain plant vascular tissues. For similar physical reasons, proponents note that this exact pattern shows up not only in confirmed igneous formations, but also in the exposed cross-sections of buttes, officially classified as sediment. The chemistry has been tested and labeled sandstone, yet the geometry remains. Whether that matters depends on what lies beneath something visuals alone can't answer. A tree at the proposed scale would have left a massive root system. Modern large conifers send roots 2 to 3 times the crown radius outward and downward through multiple soil layers. At the diameters suggested here, those roots would have spread hundreds of feet in every direction, depositing dense organic material across many geological horizons. That organic matter doesn't vanish without trace. Root decomposition leaves measurable geochemical signatures: elevated carbon, altered pH, changed mineral ratios that soil scientists use to map ancient root channels long after the tree is gone. Ground-penetrating radar (GPR) is another standard tool, already used at archaeological sites, Roman roads, and to locate heritage tree roots before construction. Yet no published GPR survey or paleosol analyses of the base zones beneath the key formations appears in the accessible geological literature. Devil's Tower brings the question into focus. Classified by the USGS as a phonolite, porphyry igneous intrusion, it rises 867 feet with a summit about 180 feet across. Its hexagonal columns are textbook examples of column. The chemistry checks out. What proponents flag is the transition zone at the base, where the columns meet the surrounding sedimentary rock. In typical intrusions, You expect clear-baked margins and thermal metamorphism. Some argue the geometry of Devil's Tower doesn't perfectly match that expectation, though the zone has never been systematically mapped with modern subsurface tools. The same proportional pattern repeats across continents. Venezuela's tepuis mountains rising up to 9,000 feet are labeled Precambrian sandstone. Monument Valley's buttes stand for 100 to 1,000 feet high with sheer walls and flat summits, described as erosional remnants. Western Australia's Bungle range is dated to 375-million-year-old sedimentary deposition and differential erosion. For each, there is an official explanation and one structural detail wall regularity. Summit flatness, spacing, or base transition that proponents say falls outside standard model predictions. Not isolated anomalies, they argue, but a consistent pattern across unrelated geological settings on 4 continents. The formations haven't moved. The measurements are still in public surveys. The tools for a decisive test GPR and paleosol chemistry are routine elsewhere. A single targeted survey would cost about the price of a standard research grant. Yet, as far as the published record shows, that test has never been conducted at any of the flagged sites. That absence doesn't prove the theory correct. It only shows the question has never been formally asked of the ground. Credible proponents aren't demanding belief. They're asking for 1 GPR transect and 1 paleosol analysis. At a key contact zone, whatever the results, they would narrow the uncertainty. I keep thinking about an ordinary person who drove out on a Saturday, stood at the base of one of these formations, looked up at the sheer walls and flat summit, and felt the official story didn't quite add up. They ran the ratio in their head, stood with the number for a while, then drove home. That person isn't wrong for noticing. The proportion is real. The formation is still there. The ground beneath it holds whatever truth the instruments would reveal if anyone ever points them there. The formations remain Devil's Tower in Wyoming, the tepuis above the Venezuelan jungle, the buttes of Monument Valley, the striped towers of the Kimberly Plateau. Their dimensions haven't changed. The light still catches the flat summits the same way. The walls still carry the geometry that started the question, and the substrate underneath still waits for the right question to be asked. Let me know in the comments if this ratio has ever struck you the same way, or if you've stood beneath one of these places and felt that quiet mismatch. Drop your location, subscribe if you want more deep dives like this, and I'll see you in the next one.